Dear Azure, where we have lined up for a series of sessions with all international speakers. So it's really good to see. Thank you so much, and hello everyone. Very good morning and good noon or evening to all of you from wherever you're connecting with me. I'm here, Abdul Rashid Feroz Khan, and I mean, if you are a follower of Dear Azure, then I'm not supposed to be a new person to you people. But then, in case if you're, I mean, like if you're joining for the first time, then I just wanna give a hi to all of you. I'm a Microsoft MVP on Azure, and I'm the founder and CEO of Code cloud consulting company, which is based out of India and Middle East, and we are Microsoft partners doing cloud consulting, cloud migrations, right? Related to SAP, related to infra migrations, and setting up IoT cloud as well. So that's something about us. And I'm joining you today from Dear Azure, and I'm really super excited to share how Microsoft is empowering the container environment. And we are going to speak much in detail about how to be innovative with containerization on Azure. So, before getting on to this discussion, I would like to speak a few notes, or I would say a few details of the future, which is said to be with cloud native. And with that, I would like to move towards the container environment. The future is all defined by the accelerated innovation that we have, and much of this innovation will be digital, and it takes the form of new applications. And the apps of the future are said to be where we have the cloud native thing. So these apps are designed to take the full advantage of the latest innovation that's said to be available in the public cloud. It could be any intelligent apps that you speak, or it's going to be infused with AI to provide advanced insights and quickly able to incorporate. And we also have like incorporating the open source technology in the libraries, which is said to be available across the globe. So now there are like thousands of customers in every industry who are building and running modern cloud native applications on Azure today. So here are the customers, the trusted by thousands of customers that we have who are running with the open source libraries and the containerization environment on Microsoft Azure. So using cloud native design patterns helps many of our customers in achieving about the agility, reliability, scalability, and the security that's demanded by the next generation of apps. Let's talk about a few examples where we'll be having the next generation of apps that are being built everywhere and are now out of this world as well. So we see innovations of every industry that's said to be available. I would say like we have Bosch, we have Emirates, we have Starbucks, right? So it's going to be like industries which ranges from automobile, which it ranges on banking, right? Which ranges on healthcare, which ranges on e-commerce industries. So it's almost like we have a coverage of thousands of customers who have been dependent with the open source market today. So the open source is said to be the biggest differentiator for the organizations. Microsoft is like the days are gone where Microsoft used to say that we are dependent only with the Microsoft technology or the products that we have. We now have the environment which has moved towards Microsoft, which has moved towards the open source market. The open source software is an integral part of the development at Microsoft, and it's aligned with the goal to empower all developers to be successful building any applications using any language on any platform thing. So Microsoft is committed to building open, flexible technology and working with the open source community to grow together as an industry there. Microsoft contributions span multiple areas from operating systems to programming languages, from data and AI to web. Microsoft is also it's also focusing on cloud native development, making writing microservices and using Kubernetes service with projects like Dapper, Helm, and Kata 2. Microsoft is also an active collaborator on the Postgres community and the Postgres committers who are members of Microsoft product team as well. So here is all the Microsoft's contributions that we have with open source. With Azure, Microsoft is constantly providing capabilities that can help meet your needs to work with open source. And with the increasing open source adoption, it's imperative that it runs smoothly on the Azure cloud. On Azure, you can also run like multiple apps and increase the workload performance and security while also optimizing your IT costs then. Here's the open source on Azure, running your applications on your way while optimizing the IT cost. So technologies like K8s, that's your Kubernetes, containers, uh, serverless functions, APIs, and DevOps is said to be all how the developers come to get new agility, reliability, and face the security challenges that they have today. Now, developers today often gravitate towards Azure's suite of application service because they are highly optimized for productivity and deeply integrated with both GitHub and with Visual Studio Code too. The Azure App Service makes building and managing web applications and the APIs easy with a fully managed platform and features like auto scaling. We have deployment slots and integrated web authentication too. We recently closed the premium capabilities of Azure Application Services to run on Kubernetes. So that's set to be container on Microsoft, right? So these application services can now run anywhere across Azure, on premises or AWS, GCP, and all with Azure Arc as well. Any Kubernetes cluster now is set to be connected through Azure App is now a supported deployment target for these application services then. So with these updates, you can innovate faster by using Azure's suite of application services then. So it's all like tailored to real world application patterns loaded with unique features and optimized for developer productivity. Developers don't just have to choose between the productivity of Azure Application Service and the control of Kubernetes. You can just run those same Azure Application Service on top of the Kubernetes environment too. Here's the innovation with Cloud Native. We have hybrid with Cloud Native apps. We have Kubernetes on Azure, and we do have the serverless container apps. So let's make sense with these three things so that you get a glimpse on understanding how the container environment is set to be there on Azure. So what is Cloud Native? Cloud Native is where it's an area where we have added up microservices, we have containers with Docker or Kubernetes, and we do have some automated functions which can be working on, right? We have Azure functions with the serverless environment. You can also build your own API, or you can even go up. You can say like the API managements to be done with a load testing all. And at top of it, we have DevOps, where we call people working with the entire family of project to work together and give up the solution for the same to work with open source libraries. So the Azure Application Service, where we have this Azure App Service, we have functions, logic apps. We do have automated actions that can work with Event Grid, Event Hub, sending data, managing the data as well. And we do have the API management that's available. So any containerization that you speak about, it has the connectivity with Azure. It has the connectivity with all third parties too. Here is about the Azure Application Service, where it accelerates the development with the turnkey services. It also gives you a productivity of IaaS to work with Kubernetes environment with the PaaS offering. We also have running your apps anyway using the Azure Arc thing. The core important part is to be here with Kubernetes on Azure. So the Kubernetes on Azure is said to be the enterprise grade by design. So Microsoft has now come up. I mean, it had been like long days that Microsoft came up with a service called AKS, and we started like integrating the third-party applications to be working on with Microsoft Azure. So Kubernetes, the container environment can be run on Azure Data Center here. We can use the development tools, which is said to be with bridging to Kubernetes, or we can even say that you go with GitHub, you come up with Visual Studio Code, or we do have ACR. So instead of using any like Docker Hub kind of stuff, we can go with ACR, the Azure Container Registry, and you can keep your images to be stored there. We also have Azure Monitor, which can then store the images, right? Which can manage the logs of what's happening on your container environment there. We have the platform, we have Azure Active Directory, where you can manage the applications to be registered all. We can connect with the on-premise connectivity of applications too. We do have the Azure policies on which we can set up role-based access control permissions. And we have the security center. So Microsoft with Kubernetes, they have the security center that's set to be available, where they take responsibilities to keep your patterns to be secure. They have Key Vault to keep your phrases, to keep your passwords to be secure. And we do have Advisor, where Microsoft comes with the recommendations then. So containers, or let me say the Kubernetes on Azure has come up with these three environment, which is said to be AKS, ACI, and the Red Hat or the OpenShift that we have too. So Microsoft is part of all these this vibrant community and leads the associated committees to help shape the future of the Kubernetes and its ecosystem as well. Let's understand about the AKS here. AKS is said to be an enterprise grade by design, and it has all the built-in best practices that has been added. It has a multi-layer security, and it's like increased with operations efficiency too. Here's the AKS on the Azure Stack HCI. So the development in AKS is set to be deployed with unmodified to the edge, and you can modernize, you can come up with a Windows or Linux apps. And we do have like the data services, which is set to be on the Azure Stack HCI that's available. You have the general availability that's set to be there available now with AKS, the Azure Kubernetes Service. So you just go, you use the OSM with the add-on, enabling this easy traffic shifting. The point here is that why you can use AKS on Azure is you just go get a cost cutoff. You just use the different series of machines that are available in Microsoft Azure. And you do have the support of more data center regions compared to other cloud service providers that are available. Other than that, you have the service mesh interface. You have like telemetry. You have policies that can be added as well. Okay, so that's all like other possibilities and the advantages that we have. Here is all the K8s on Azure, the Kubernetes on Azure. You go with Azure slash AKS or the GitHub, or you can even take a note of the link which has been shared here, echo.ms with the roadmap of AKS, which lets you know about the recent announcements and the roadmaps that's set to be available on the Microsoft Azure environment with AKS. Finally, we do have the serverless container apps. So the serverless container apps is where we stick on towards the cloud native applications. We have like the enterprise grade by design. You can sketch up with I would say microservice, where you have like service fabric or like any stateful or stateless applications that can be deployed. We do have the Kubernetes on Azure. The Kubernetes is said to be, the Google's container environment, which is integrated with Microsoft Azure, and on top of it, the serverless, which is said to be Azure Functions or Event Grid, Event Hub that you speak about. We do have the support with DevOps then, and we also have like a multi-layered security and the innovation, which is said to be anywhere at scale. So based on the workload that you have, you're gonna come up with scaling, and you have the multi-cloud that can be hosted too. We then have the Azure Container Apps. So now the teams might feel that in order to get the benefits of cloud native, their only choice is Kubernetes directly. But I would say the Kubernetes is a layer on top of the infrastructure with its own set of APIs and the concepts that a developer will need to understand to get their code running then. So this can all add complexity, cost, and impact the speed in which a team can get their services running, reliability, and securely in the cloud as well. So to overcome this, Microsoft, at the latest Ignite event, it announced the service called Azure Container Apps that's set to be available. The Container Apps provides the same microservice benefits as Kubernetes, but in a fully managed and serverless platform there. So this provides a path for teams to build microservices without having to overcome the concept and operational overhead of targeting the Kubernetes directly. We build the containers based on microservice, and it's all with just your app and the code that's to be available. The container app is the only serverless container solution offering a combination of both built-in HTTP-based auto-scaling, including scale to zero and event-driven based auto-scaling to run containers that may be processing messages from queues, streams, or databases as well. The container app supports microservice architecture, but with container, you can use like any language, framework, or runtime too. So here is about the Azure Container Apps. It provides the native access to powerful open source projects and the frameworks as well. The teams can write the code in your favorite language, and they can even accelerate the development through the built-in integration with Dapper to simplify the common tasks like service discovery, publish and subscribe, managing state, and much more as well. The container apps will provide a streamlined code to cloud with the pipelines there with integration on the GitHub Actions too. Finally, the container apps is built on the foundation of powerful open source technology. And behind the scenes, every container app runs securely on Azure Kubernetes servers with open source technology like Keda, Dapper, and Envoy, which is baked in. So this lets you perform modern application lifecycle tasks such as application upgrades, traffic shifting, versioning, which is like all ready to run for your teams from the get-go. We then have the comparison of those Azure container hosting options. We have like you see here, we have the container apps. I just want to give you a glimpse of how these three things, the containers, are said to be supported in Microsoft Azure. So the Azure Container Apps is like you host your container with any microservice that's deployed in the containers here. And the same is going to be with the AKS too. You see, it's set to be AKS. And you can host your container with many microservices deployed in the containers, the same kind of executions that we do with the container instance. But what makes the difference here is that you get the support of Dapper, you get the support of Keda and Envoy when you use the Azure Container Apps. You do scaling on your own based on the traffic that you have. And we do have like the Kubernetes APIs, which are managed by Microsoft then. So the example is like just for you to make sense. I have said it's Ola. Like you rent a car, you rent a platform, which is said to be AC Azure Container Apps, and you host your application on it, right? You just take a ride. So it has the support of Keda, just same like how the driver is given, and you just hop in, you take the ride to the destination that we have, just same like that. Whereas you see AKS, it's more like your own car, right? You fuel it, and here it's same. You get the infrastructure, you get the control on the cluster management, and you speak about the nodes and the pods that are set to be spinned up. Container instance is said to be, it provides a single pod of Hyper-V isolated containers. It's like a Zoom car. You rent a car and you drive it on your own, right? Just same like that. You get a single pod of Hyper-V isolated containers and you host your application in it. So I just thought of giving you these comparisons so that you can make sense about how the containerization has been evolved with Microsoft Azure. Let's speak in detail about the Azure container instance. So let's compare the container to the virtual machines that's said to be available. So container versus virtual machine is like it speaks a lot about the isolation, speaks about the operating system, deployment, the persistence stories that we get, and the fault tolerance too. So isolation is like you have the applications which are said to be isolated from the guest OS, right? You have the individual library files that are said to be available, and the size of the application is going to be really small when you compare it towards a virtual machine. So normally what happens when you go to a VM is that you would have seen we have plenty many applications that are said to be evolved, right? The application softwares which makes no sense to run a .NET application, right? So let's say, for example, if you're hosting a .NET web application, you just need Windows Server with IAS. Provided here, when you speak with a VM, you might have a notepad, you might have a paint tool, you have a calculator, and you have no reason why you need all these application softwares to be hosted on a Windows Server machine. End of the day, you just need IES with any respective SDKs to be done there, right? So what container does is that it takes the flavor of the library files and the binary that's to be needed, and you host your multiple applications towards the same. So a container can have multiple applications over the same. You can host multiple applications on a container. Provided they in the VM you have like a guest OS, right? It's gonna be a complete virtualization. And here you use the images like you go with Docker, Swarm engine, or you go with the Kubernetes engine. Whereas in a virtual machine, it's gonna be like the hypervisor where you're gonna virtualize the entire image of your virtual machine. The Azure Container Instance also has benefits like they provide you with a pass offering, they provide you with the fast startup times, right? You do have like the public IP that's to be available, and we do have the options like the connectivity with the DNS name and the isolations that's to be available, and you come up with the custom sizes and the container which can be running on Linux and Windows too. We do have the co-scheduled groups and the virtual network deployment that gets carried up too. Here is about implementing the container groups. So you can simply go, you can try deploying a container instance in Azure using the Azure portal by giving it this DNS name. You have like a collection of containers that get scheduled on the same host. To understand the Docker platform, here we go with Docker on Azure. So you have like Docker Hub, which can be with Ubuntu, Linux, Windows, or we can even have the Nginx that can be hosted too. It enables the developers to host applications within a container, and the container is standardized with the unit of software that contains everything which is required for an application to run. It can be both on a Windows or it can be even in a Linux environment. And as said before, we do have the AKS. So this is a core important stuff where you need to understand the terminologies, right? We have pools where it has a group of nodes with all the identical configurations. We do then have nodes, which is like individual VMs running containerized applications. We then have the pods. So it's all like a single instance of your application that we can host. And then we do have a pod which can contain multiple containers. The deployment, where you can have like one or more identical pods that's managed by gates, and finally a YAML manifest file that speaks about the deployment too. Okay, I'll stick on to the questions. I'm not following up with the chat. I'll stick on to the questions once when I'm done with it. I just need like another some 10 to 15 minutes to speak about AKS, and I'll let you know where you can explore about the containerization environment. And probably the last 15 minutes, I'll stick on to the questions then. Here is about the AKS cluster and the nodes. So it's almost like you need to understand this AKS cluster and the nodes. So here is understanding the AKS cluster and the nodes that you have. So this reference architecture provides a recommended baseline infrastructure architecture to deploy an AKS cluster on Azure. It uses our design principles and it's based on the architectural best practices that we have. See, you could find we have like a network topology. We do have like a hub that's to be available. We have spoke, right? So the point here is like you have the Azure managed nodes that feeds on with the container image reference that's to be available. And we go with the hub. The hub virtual network is the central point of connectivity and the observability as well. So yeah, a hub always contains an Azure firewall with global firewall policies that's defined by your central IT teams to enforce the organization's wide firewall policy. Azure Bastion, which is said to be a gateway with a subnet for a VPN connectivity too. We then have the Qt proxy sol that can be configured here, and the Azure files and disk that can be connected as well. So each individual node is said to be a virtual machine that gets connected here. So the next comes your configuring, the AKS storage. You can connect your individual storage options here, which has a persistent volume. But even in case like if one node gets failed, you might be having the other node that works for you. You go on with the environments where we have the storage options for the applications to connect with the AKS. So this is all like you configure with the API server all. You need volumes. Okay, the multiple pods may need to share the same data volumes here. And you can like reattach the data volumes if the pod is rescheduled on a different node. So volumes is like the Kubernetes typically treats individual pods as the disposable resource, and the applications have different approaches available to them for using and persisting the data. A volume represents a way to store, retrieve, and persist the data across the pods and through the application lifecycle as well. The traditional volumes are created as Kubernetes resource, which is backed by Azure Storage, and you can manually create data volumes to be assigned to the pods directly. Or we can even have like Kubernetes, which is automatically created with them. The next is Azure Disks, which creates a Kubernetes data disk resource. So we have like Ultra disks, premium solid state drives, standard solid state drives, and finally the standard hard disks that can be connected to. We also get the support with Azure files, or we go with Azure NetApp files, the blob storage that can be connected all. So this is all like what we have as the storage classes and the storage connectivity with the container environment. The next is your scaling, configuring AKS with respect to scaling. So scaling is like scaling the options for applications in the AKS service here. So see, as you run applications in AKS, you may need to increase or decrease the amount of compute resource there. So as the number of application instance you need change, the number of underlying Kubernetes, I would say the number of underlying Kubernetes nodes, which may also need to change then. We go up, you might also need to quickly provision a large number of applications, additional application instance to be given up there. So manually, you can scale the pods or nodes, and you also have like a horizontal pod autoscaler. The Kubernetes uses the horizontal pod autoscaler. We call it as HPA in short to monitor the resource demand, and automatically it scales the number of replicas too. So by default, the horizontal pod autoscaler checks the metrics API every 15 seconds for any required changes in replica count. But the metrics API retrieves data from the kubelet for every 60 seconds too. We can then like cool down of the scaling events. We go with a cluster autoscaler. So to respond to changing pod demands, the Kubernetes has a cluster autoscaler, and that adjusts the number of nodes based on the requested compute resource in the node pool. By default, the cluster autoscaler checks the metrics API server every 10 seconds of any required change in the node count then. So if the cluster autoscaler determines that a change is required, then the number of nodes in your AKS cluster is increased or then decreased automatically. Well, so that's about the scaling, and followed by the scaling part. We do have this. I mean, the one which we have been discussing with ACI. You can always go. You can connect with the Azure Container Instance to get scaled up to. So that's about containers. And as it's said to be a kickstart, we don't have a demo of it, but I would highly recommend you to, if you have an Azure active subscription, I would request you to go with this URL to check with the latest release of containerization on Microsoft. So it's like container apps. See, let me go. I hope you all can see my screen. And there at the Chrome, you can go with container apps. Right, we have get started. It speaks about the container apps, the resource that we have, and you can make sense about when the container apps can be installed. You should be already familiar with the AKS ACI kind of steps, provided the container apps is set to be the new release of Microsoft with a container ecosystem on Microsoft Azure, and this helps you to work with the container apps then. So that's about the containers that we have. And I would recommend you also to build your apps in Azure and join us for more exciting talks, which has been lined up. We have another like probably some 20 to 25 minutes. I would be holding here to hear from you. If you have any questions, please. Any questions for me? Anything on the chat? Chat. Hi, team. Any questions for me on the containers?
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, you're audible.
So Abhishek this side. I have one question that now the Azure is coming up with many managed services for the Kubernetes, like their container services. So do we still need to have some knowledge of the Kubernetes, or it can be no clear Kubernetes knowledge is required to use these services?
All right. See, that's really a nice question, but I would say this completely depends on the infra planning that you're going to come up with. If you have an idea of setting up your own infrastructure with the VNet or with your Azure Stack HCI, you definitely need an understanding with the Kubernetes that we have. Other than that, if you are a developer who is going to focus on just hosting the web application, not something which is set to be hybrid or any, then you can go with a managed service that's set to be available on Azure. So it depends. It depends on the native applications that you're going to host it on the cloud. I would simply say it's recommended to have a clear cutting edge knowledge of the Kubernetes, right? Instead of completely relying on the managed service that's said to be on Azure. It depends on how you can roll the plan of your solution, isn't it? You're getting me?
Yeah, yeah, I get it. And one more thing, like we have two services like as AKS and container apps, right?
Yeah.
So, what are the real scenario where we can use, need to use the prefer to more the AKS and some cases in the Kubernetes container services.
Okay, container apps is more about like it's a managed service. You're gonna get the support of Kira, you're going to get the support of Tapper that's set to be available all. Okay, so that's set to be on the Azure Container Apps. Provided when you speak about the AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, you say like how many number of nodes that you need, how many number of pods that you need, right? You say the master and the slave nodes on how it has to be configured. You're also going to speak about the configuration of the machine that's set to be there. You take care of the activity logs that's happening with your container environment. Okay, so the entire responsibility is said to be yours when you speak about the AKS. You take care of infra and you also work on the development part, which is said to be on AKS. Perhaps when you use the Azure Container Apps, you're going to be only a developer. You're not going to worry about the service that's going to be given by Microsoft. It's the responsibility of Microsoft where they give you a container platform environment. You call the image from Docker Hub, you call the image from ACR anywhere, you host the application. That's it. You're not going to worry about what's exactly there behind the scene that's happening on the container apps. It's the responsibility of Microsoft to take care of it. Is
Okay,
that
thanks.
okay? Yeah. All right.
It need more control than AKS is a suitable choice, right?
Exactly. Container apps, ACI is all like you get more control on the container, and you focus on the. I mean, like you get more control on the development part. You're not going to focus on the container. Managing the container is taken care by Microsoft. Provided when you speak about AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, you get more control on infra. You get more control on the containers. Okay, and you also need to work on the development part there.
Thanks.
Okay,
All
to
right, that's
add
my.
to
Can you also
this,
confirm like if there are any cost differences between the two services? Does ACS provides better costing as it's a managed service?
AKS as a average costing of I would say like higher when you compare it towards the app service with Docker all that we host. So the AKS service is said to be costly compared to the managed service like Docker, I mean web app that we have, the app service, or you speak about the Azure container apps that we have. Okay. So AKS is costly solution. Provided container apps is all like you get a cost cutoff. Speaking in real time, what exactly would be the cost cutoff? I would say a marginal ratio of like 30% would be lesser when you use the managed service that's set to be on Azure.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
All right. Arif, you will be getting the PPT for sure. I mean, like, I'll be sharing it to Kazam, and you can be in touch with him. You should be getting the recording, which is said to be for sure. And regarding the deck, Kazam will be again helping you on the same. I came
Thank you.
across like Kazam. Yeah, that's okay. Kazam,
Hello.
you were to add something?
yeah, it is. It was just for like Abhishek and Parag were asking the question about Azure Container Apps. So
Hmm.
just wanted to add, like as I said earlier, in Feb we have a session, uh, like targeting this one, like to have to deploy a .NET application with Azure like AI stack and everything, and to deploy it to the Azure Container Apps step by step with a demo. So we have planned this session, so it would be an interesting one. If you have this background, like after today's talk, and if you go through the links which were given about the container apps and all, So that session will really help you to understand the things in much better way, and you can, if you have any queries, you can just post it that time it also. That's it. Yeah.
All
Thanks.
right. Any other questions for me? Can we use Docker without Kubernetes? I would not say. I mean, like you need KH as well. It's not like you just use Docker. No, yeah, you need Kubernetes. You cannot go with a standalone thing. Any other questions? Docker is available as a PaaS offering as a managed service on Azure as well. So that's something which you can use it on without the reliability of Kubernetes. Uh, Provided when you speak about AKS all, you need Kubernetes for sure. Israr, I hope your question is answered.
Yeah, the answer was, can we use Docker without Kubernetes? But yes, we have been using Windows Docker with Container as an OpenStack.
You
But it's
can,
on-prem.
yes. But when you speak about service like AKS, you definitely need Kubernetes.
Yep.
All right. Cool. We will get PPT in WhatsApp group. Uh, I guess the lead should be the right person to answer it. Kasam?
Yes, yes, sure.
Okay, okay,
We'll share
thanks.
the recording link and all these things on the group.
All right, makes sense. Well, any other questions for me? We do have like another 15 minutes of time. Let's make sense, please. Well, Kasam, you
So,
want to share something? Yeah.
yes, one thing, like for this containerization, or if you talk about Dockers and all, is there any special certification available, kind of? Like,
I
apart from
remember
Kubernetes
like
certification, apart from Kubernetes certification.
you're asking from the side of Microsoft, if I'm not wrong. Is that right?
Yes, yes, kind of, yeah.
Yes, I guess there is a roadmap which is built by Microsoft for especially for containers. So yeah, it's like Kubernetes learning that Microsoft was planning for it, but as of now, it's a part of the Azure developer program that we have. We don't have any exclusive track that's to be available for container. Provided I can look for, give me a minute. I recently came up with this Kubernetes learning and training from Microsoft. Learning and training from Microsoft. Yeah, you see this? So this is something that Microsoft has suggested with a learning path. So they say how you can get prepared with 50 days to go with K8s, but nothing like a certification. The certification part is still available with the developer. You know, we have the developer certification of Microsoft now. We are holding on with the same. Microsoft is planning with an exclusive track for this, but as of now, there's nothing like exam code or any specific track for this. Maybe I would share this, which can help you out.
Okay. Yeah. There is one more question came in. Two questions are.
Oh, sure. Let me check that. What makes Azure Dockers and Kubernetes different from the cloud provider? There's nothing different except the number of data center regions. The more the number of data center regions that we have, the support of different series of machines, right? We have like all kind of machines set to be available. I mean, like a D series machine, or you used to know, we go with any high performance compute machines that are set to be available. So that makes the difference. But other than that, costing, of course, right? I would not say it costs, there's a lot many cost differences, such, but there's a minute cost difference that Microsoft costs you less, where there's no costing involved for cluster management all in Microsoft, provided Google, all you need to pay there. Okay, so that's like a minor difference that we come across. Other than that, the service kind of support is said to be the same with both. What are the best practices that has to be followed with Docker? Nothing much. If you are said to be a developer who is sticking on towards a Docker, you're definitely going to be a managed task guy. So you focus on the development, and other that the best practices is like you need to make sure the respective extensions are set to be available on the local environment that you have. You might be using Wishput Studio Code or anything. And on top of it, you also need to have an architectural knowledge of how you can configure with the DNS name, how you can come up with, the security protocols that we have with Docker on Azure. Hi, Upendra. I'm a beginner in Azure and got a lot of information here, and I'm hoping for a fantastic journey throughout the series. But also hoping PPT and should do that in this. Definitely, yes. Kazam will be doing that, not to worry. Yeah. All right. Then we can let's get into the Kubernetes starting and training course. Absolutely, yes. You can do Kubernetes if you already have a knowledge of just developing a native application. You should be good enough to move on then. Any other questions for me? I'm a .NET developer with around 10 plus experience beginning in Docker Azure as a correct time to move on different technology and also. Mangesh, I would say people have already moved towards container environment. We have started migrating from the traditional to VM, and we have now moved from VM to container as well. So I would say it's already like late, but then never than the late, you can give a quick kickstart to work with the container now. Well, any other questions? Oh, that's our pleasure, Kazan. Thank you very much for hosting this event as well. And I would also thank the wholehearted learners who have been joining us, right, and keeping us enthusiastic as well. Thank you, everyone.